Boundaries. We all know we need them, but setting them feels about as comfortable as wearing shoes on the wrong feet. Today, we're diving into why healthy boundaries are the secret sauce to thriving relationships and a balanced life.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. I've always thought of boundaries as walls, but you're making them sound almost appetizing.
Well, that's because they are. Think of boundaries as the seasoning that makes your life taste just right. Without them, everything's a bit bland and overwhelming. With them, you've got the perfect balance of flavors.
Hmm, I like that analogy. So, where do we start with this whole boundary setting thing?
Well, Dr. Jonathan Chuma, an expert in this field, suggests we begin by recognizing the importance of boundaries for our emotional and physical health. It's like understanding that you need a good night's sleep before you can actually get one?
That makes sense. But how do we know when our boundaries need a little reinforcement? What are the warning signs?
Great question. Dr. Chuma says we should pay attention to those times when we feel drained, overwhelmed, or disrespected. It's like your emotional gas tank is running on empty. You know that feeling when you've said yes to one too many social events and suddenly you're exhausted just thinking about leaving the house?
Oh, do I ever? So, if I'm constantly feeling like I need a nap after agreeing to every coffee date and dinner invitation, that's a red flag?
Exactly. It's like your body and mind are sending you a clear message. Hey, we need a break here. And you know what? It's okay to listen to that message. In fact, it's crucial.
Right, well, that's easier said than done. What about the guilt that comes with saying no? I mean, I don't want to let people down or seem selfish.
Ah, the guilt trip. It's a classic, isn't it? But here's the thing. Dr. Chuma suggests we reframe no as an act of self care. When you decline a request, you're actually prioritizing your own well being, which is essential. It's like putting on your own oxygen mask before helping others on a plane.
That's a really helpful perspective. It's not about being selfish, it's about protecting your energy and time so you can be there for others in a meaningful way.
Exactly. And here's a practical tip from Dr. Chuma. Practice saying no in low stakes situations. It's like building a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Maybe start by declining a party invitation from an acquaintance before working up to bigger boundaries.
I love that. Start small and work your way up. But what about those people who just don't seem to respect boundaries? The ones who push and push until you give in?
Oh, we all know those types. They're like emotional bulldozers, aren't they? Dr. Chuma emphasizes the importance of consistency when dealing with them. If we're inconsistent or allow them to cross our lines repeatedly, it sends mixed signals and creates confusion.
So it's not just about setting boundaries, but also about enforcing them consistently?
Absolutely. And if someone challenges your boundaries, Dr. Chuma recommends calmly and firmly reminding them of your needs. It's about being assertive without being aggressive. Think of it as standing your ground without stomping on anyone else's toes.
That sounds like a delicate balance. Any tips on finding that sweet spot?
Well, practice makes perfect, right? It might feel uncomfortable at first, but it gets easier over time. And here's something else to consider. Dr. Chuma points out that respecting others' boundaries is just as important as setting our own. It's like a two-way street of mutual respect.
Oh, that's a good point. It's easy to get so caught up in our own needs that we forget about others. How do we make sure we're not stepping on anyone's toes?
Great question. Dr. Chuma suggests paying close attention to both verbal and nonverbal cues. If someone seems uncomfortable or expresses a boundary, we need to respect that without trying to change their mind. It's like learning to read the room, but on a more personal level.
It's about mutual respect, right? Recognizing that everyone has their own limits and needs. But what about in the workplace? That's a whole different ballgame.
Oh, absolutely. The workplace can be a minefield when it comes to boundaries. With emails and messages popping up at all hours, it's hard to switch off. Dr. Chuma suggests setting clear working hours for yourself and avoiding checking emails or taking calls after hours unless it's an absolute emergency.
That sounds ideal, but sometimes it feels impossible in today's always on culture. How do you communicate those boundaries without seeming uncooperative?
It's all about clear communication. Dr. Chuma recommends being upfront and polite with colleagues about your boundaries. For example, you might say, I'm available for urgent matters until 7 p.m., but after that, I'll respond first thing in the morning. It's about managing expectations and prioritizing your well being.
So, if I need to leave the office by 6 p.m. to make it to my yoga class, I should just be upfront about it?
Exactly. It's better to be upfront than to burn yourself out trying to please everyone. And speaking of burnout, Dr. Chuma talks about the importance of recognizing the signs of boundary violations. You know, those red flags that pop up when someone's crossing a line.
Like feeling resentful, exhausted, or constantly overwhelmed?
Bingo! Those are all classic signs. If you notice these feelings cropping up, it's time to pause and assess whether someone's crossed a line. And here's the kicker: Dr. Chuma suggests addressing the issue directly but respectfully. Have a calm conversation with the person, explaining how their actions are affecting you, and restate your boundaries.
It's about being assertive, but not aggressive, right? Finding that balance can be tricky.
Absolutely, it's like walking a tightrope, but with practice, you get better at it. And remember, setting boundaries is an ongoing process. Our needs and circumstances change, so it's important to reassess our boundaries regularly.
So, it's not a one time thing, but rather a continuous journey of self discovery and adjustment.
Exactly. Dr. Chuma recommends scheduling regular boundary check ins with yourself to see how you're feeling in different areas of your life and make adjustments as needed. It's like giving your emotional health a tune up.
I love that idea. It's like a mental health checkup for your boundaries. Any other tips from Dr. Chuma that we haven't covered?
Oh, here's a big one: setting boundaries with technology. In this digital age, it's become increasingly important to protect our mental space from the constant barrage of notifications and information.
Oh, that's a huge issue. With social media and emails constantly vying for our attention, it's hard to disconnect. How does Dr. Chuma suggest we handle that?
Well, he recommends setting specific times for checking emails and social media, and creating phone free zones or times in your day. For example, you might decide to keep your phone out of the bedroom or turn off notifications during dinner.
That sounds challenging but potentially life changing. I can see how it could lead to better sleep and more meaningful face to face interactions.
Absolutely. It's about reclaiming your time and attention. And you know what? Studies have shown that people who set clear boundaries with technology report higher levels of life satisfaction and lower levels of stress.
Wow, that's fascinating. This conversation has been eye opening. It's amazing how much we compromise our own well being by not setting healthy boundaries.
It really is. But the good news is that we can learn to set and maintain healthy boundaries. It takes practice, but the rewards are well worth the effort. Just imagine a life where you feel more in control, less stressed, and more fulfilled in your relationships.
That sounds pretty amazing. So, to sum it all up, know your limits, communicate them clearly, and don't be afraid to say no.
You got it. And remember, setting boundaries is an act of self care, not selfishness. It's about creating an environment of respect and understanding, both for yourself and others.
Beautifully said. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today's episode of Gen FM. We hope this discussion on healthy boundaries has inspired you to create some healthy boundaries in your own life.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. Start small, be consistent, and don't be afraid to adjust your boundaries as needed. Who knows? You might just find that setting boundaries is the key to unlocking a more balanced and fulfilling life. Until next time, take care of yourselves.